Okay, this is a story about the best cold call of all time. In the late 60s, 1969, somebody cold called John Lennon of the Beatles and got him to fly that night from England to Toronto to play at a festival in Toronto. This is absolutely nuts. That's a summary of it. I'm going to go into more detail here. So, there's a guy who's a promoter for this concert they're going to have in Toronto. But they weren't getting the numbers they wanted from people who were buying tickets. So, this guy decided and was encouraged also by his colleagues to just call John Lennon, and who knows? Just do it, and who knows? So, he calls John Lennon, and who answers was John Lennon's screener. You know, it was the guy who took all of the calls from people calling John Lennon and then relayed the nature of it to John Lennon if it wasn't just total BS. So the screener picks up. The dude who made the call, the promoter, said, "This is a concert where we're going to have Chuck Berry, all of these 50s idols of John Lennon." And the screener is scribbling this down furiously. Chuck Berry, concert, Toronto. John Lennon was actually there, and he pulled the phone out of the screener's hand and said, "Yes, I'm in." And the dude had said to the screener, "It's tomorrow. He's going to have to fly overnight." And John Lennon, again, what he said was, "I'm in. Let's do this." This would be like if I were to call Tom Cruise and be like, "Hey man, come be in my movie tomorrow." And he was like, "Yes, let's do it." But wait, there's more to this story. So, John Lennon says yes, right? He also has to get a band together that's not the Beatles, right? So, he calls Eric Clapton, who says, "I'm in also." And this is also where the story is nuts. He calls the 20-year-old drummer of a band that he saw like the week before and said, "We need a drummer. Can you drum at this concert with us tomorrow in Toronto?" Can you imagine if you were that drummer? So, the drummer's packing his stuff. He's in a band himself. And they are planning on having a concert that night. So his band members say to this drummer, "Oh man, you're missing our show." And the drummer goes, "Look, I have to go and play with John Lennon. Peace." So the next morning, the morning they're going to fly to Toronto, this John Lennon and this makeshift band he's assembled, he wakes up, he's having breakfast with Yoko Ono, and he feels more centered, and he calls the office of the promoter in Toronto and says, "I'm not going to do this anymore, and I'm sorry." So they then relay this information to the promoter, who then calls Eric Clapton because he's become aware that Eric Clapton is going to be part of this makeshift hodgepodge band, and says, "Can you please talk to John Lennon about this, because if now this does not happen, my bad, my alarm on the phone went off and stopped the video. But where I picked up, the dude who's the promoter is on the phone with Eric Clapton. He said, I'm not going to have a career anymore. I'm going to have to move to England and sleep on John Lennon's steps. Can you please convince John Lennon to do this? So Eric Clapton then gets on the phone to John Lennon and is furious and is like, dude, F you, come to this concert. You're just a rock star with an ego. You have such a giant ego. You agreed to this. And he was using expletives that I'm not saying right now, but essentially the message was, stop being a rock star with a super ego. Come and do what you agreed to do. And John Lennon is convinced and says, okay. So then they get to the airport. They're flying to Toronto, and John Lennon is having panic attacks because this is like the first time he's going to play actual music, not like this avant-garde crazy stuff that he had come out with Yoko Ono, but like actual music with a band other than the Beatles, and he is freaking out the whole plane ride. He gets there. They're in their changing room, they're backstage changing room or their hangout room, and then of course someone was then hired to get John Lennon some drugs so that he can actually play and not have a panic attack. And they played it, and there's a live album now called like Live Peace or something from Toronto, and he I think they played one Beatles song, but then he plays like this song called Cold Turkey, which was his own doing, and a few of these songs that would appear on his next solo albums. And in conclusion, it's a very hopeful story for anyone in sales, or who does cold calls. It's an amazing story because who knows? You never know what might happen.